Hello and welcome to Wild Owl TV. It seems ages since I did a video diary, and I'm very pleased now to have a day where I've got nothing much planned and I can do a video diary and get you up to date with what's going on in the Wild Owl Garden. Before I do that, I should say that it was lovely to meet some of you at the two events I've been to this week. The Grimsby Farm event, where there was over 2,000 people came along to that event, and also yesterday at the Page Park event. Both of them really nice community events, and it really has kind of reminded me that actually, although I didn't do many of those events, I do really enjoy it. And now I've got the page running and nearly 500 likes, nearly there. Share this, let's get up to 500. It really has been exciting to just listen to people and hear that they do enjoy what I do here. So that really does make a difference to my levels of enthusiasm, although I'm enthusiastic anyway. Just to know that it does actually make a difference to wildlife around the area, as you all do things in your own gardens as a result of some of the things that I'm putting forward. That is good stuff, so thank you. When we get to 500, I should be even happier. Right, let's do a video diary. So I'm going to start off with our solitary bee habitats down here. Now, my solitary bees, habitats this year, haven't really been used as much as I hoped. As you know, I bought lots of them in Morrison's, as you can see, and I know many of you did, and they're brilliant, and that's not a problem. They're there for next year. Those that did get used, there's one that is an older one that was used this year, so there's solitary bees in there, leaf cutters, and maybe some red masons, yeah, we'll have to see what happens next year. Whether it's been a bad year for solitary bees. They reckon it's actually been a bad year for honeybees this year, and it's quite possible that has also had a knock-on effect to solitary bees, which is why it's possible that's the reason why I've not got some money. I know some of you have got them you've got cells in your solitary bee habitats, but I was expecting more. Now, the thing to do now, if you've got these in your garden, you don't need to do anything other than leave them in place. The only thing I would say is that if, like these Morrison's ones, they're a little bit cheap, I would suggest perhaps putting them in the garage or in the shed. You don't want them in the house, because if you bring them in the house, they'll get too warm and potentially the bees could emerge early. So what you have in the cells that have been filled are developed bees that are going to overwinter and then emerge as next year's generation. Okay, so keep them cool, and you might want to protect them from woodpeckers if you've got them around, because they will sometimes peck out the holes. But otherwise, there's nothing you need to do other than look forward to next year when they emerge and it all starts happening again, and even more cells will be filled. Now, the wildflowers here, I actually was very late doing any gardening here, because of the fact that I was doing so much building work with the beach around the pond. But as you can see, it's obviously been very mild, exceptionally mild really for this time of year, and I still have some of these plants flowering, which has been fantastic. The borage is flowered and the wildflowers are, and even here are geraniums, but in particular here a little wildflower area with poppies. And what I've been noticing this morning, I saw a queen bee on these wildflowers here. Now, at the moment, what basically the cycle with bees is that the bee colonies would have got to their height in the summer, and then all of the bees would gradually be dying off, and so eventually all you're left with are the queens and the new queens, and those queens are going to overwinter, whether it would be down into a mouse hole or something, wherever they're going to decide to go, they'll overwinter, and then eventually emerge next spring to start the process all over again. So at the moment, this late flower is helping to keep a lot of these insects alive, so there's a higher chance of more of them being able to overwinter. Now, I'm just going to quickly cut down to the fruit feeder and just check. Now, I'll check again in a second. No, it's gone. I'll tell you about that. Oh, no, it hasn't. My mistake. There we go. I'll just there you go. Talk about stealth. So that was some red admirals, but I'll come back and see them. Yeah, there we go. A stealthy butterfly hunter, eh, McGuire? So we'll come back to that. What I was going to say was that the fruit feeders at the moment are also providing additional food resources for the red admiral butterflies. So that's good stuff. Right, where were we? Oh yes. So we've got this little wild area again here. Next year this is going to be planted up again. In fact, we have a bee here, a bumblebee, as you can see. Okay, so there's not sure, the one this morning was about 3 times the size of that. But it really is important to have flowering in your garden all through the year. So you need to know that you've got flowers that are going to start to flower early in the spring and then through the summer, and different varieties that are flowering at this time of year. That's the key to a good wildlife garden. Don't get me wrong, this garden is way far from perfect. It really isn't, because I haven't had the time or the money to really invest, but it will get better. Okay, that's plans for next year. But at the moment, thankfully, we do have some really, really good little areas. So coming around the pond is full of life. The kingfisher that is on a previous video that was amazing was sat just here, which was just fantastic. Bearing in mind the kitchen window was there, so that was an absolute joy. I haven't seen it since. We've got this area here which is at the bottom of the bird table, and lovely bird feeder that Noah made me there, and occasionally I put stuff in there. The seed does fall through there, but birds do feed from that. We've got some other feeders here which I'm now keeping topped up, and then in here this is my bumblebee house. Now, talking to people over the weekend, just explaining to them that this is such a simple way of engaging with kids, because what I've done is I've put some hay in here, and I'm fairly confident there isn't a mouse in there. I could be hiding in the corner, but what I've done is I've put hay in there and I put peanuts in there. So sprinkling peanuts in there will basically encourage the mouse to go in there. Now this now is becoming, it was interesting because there was a little bit of hay in there and he wasn't really overnighting, but now since I put more hay in, he is, and that's going to become more important for that little mouse with the winter. So we're going to put some peanuts in there later on. In fact, let's put some peanuts in there now while we're here. Let's take some out the feeder. There you go, that's all I do. Let's just pop some in there. They will be gone by tomorrow morning, and in fact what will also happen, and this is what you need to do, when it gets dark tonight, make sure that you pop the lid off and take a look. And what this one has actually got a clear perspex lid, which is great, because if the mouse jumps up at you, it will make you jump, I can tell you, because they move very fast. Now, the other thing that we've got going on here is a slightly larger mammal, and I'm going to talk about that in a second as well. Frogs in the spring and summer I was finding them every night on the gravel area, and I haven't seen a frog now for a little while. 1 or 2 in the pond about 3 weeks ago, but of course some of them will be staying in the pond. A lot of them would have left the pond now, and they'll be finding places where they can spend the following months as the weather decreases and the winter sets in. So the garden now, I haven't done any weeding or anything, but there is still some flowers around the garden. What I have done is I've set up a camera now. A lot of my cameras don't work in CCTV, but this one does work, and it is trained on this area here. Now this is where the badger goes under the garden, under the fence rather, but also something else seems to make holes in it, and I was interested in what that is, and I don't know, but I suspect I didn't know if it was a hedgehog or whether it was mice or rats, or whether it's just where the soil is disturbed by wind and that, because it's surprising what moves even with natural elements. So that's training on there. We're going to have a look at that. About 3 weeks ago, I had a text message from the daughter of a gentleman that lived over, or had like a small holding over in Old Sodbury, Harry. And Harry died, and I didn't realise, and his daughter got in touch with me and said, unfortunately we've lost Dad, and I didn't realise he had an illness. Now, Harry loved barn owls, and he was a very private man, but he also was somebody that always kept me in touch over the years. We only really got together about 3 or 4 times, but he was a lovely man, and I was really sad to hear that he'd died, but equally so I was also very happy to say, why don't we come along with the barn owl at his funeral? So I brought Missy over, and I was very privileged to take part in what was a sad day, but Harry and his family and all his friends. So thinking of you, Harry, all right, because Wild Owl TV is about people like you, it was a very special day, and I'm very grateful to Paula and Diane and Kelly for inviting me over to take part, and this is what they gave me as a thank you for going over. And to be honest with you, just to be there and share their day, although a sad day, was a big enough privilege for me, but to have this little gift as well is wonderful. So that is in the Wild Owl Garden, and this is a toad, and of course his name is Harry. So that's Harry the toad. Bless you, Harry. Thinking of you. So moving on from there, woodpecker poult, not being used every day, but I recently replenished the suet, because after a few weeks it will gradually start to go off, but the woodpecker is around, and it will only be a matter of time, I'm sure, especially when the weather gets cooler, that it is used a bit more. And then I've also put a feeder over here. Now, something that I've not really ever said about, and it's something that, I mean, the way I work with wildlife isn't having a deep knowledge of wildlife like some people. It is about logic, and logic for me is it takes me through my life in a way. The logic is, if you have birds that are territorial and they live on that side of the garden, and you have birds that are territorial that live on that side of the garden, and particularly in the Wild Owl Garden, with this path being the territorial line for birds like robins, it kind of makes sense that if you are feeding your birds over in that direction with your bird feeder, as I have, okay, so there's my bird feeding station, it's pretty obvious that the birds on this side of the garden don't want to fly across to use it because they're out of their territory. And so it's taken me a little while to really wake up to this, but I am now establishing a bird feeding station on this side of the garden so that the birds that have this territory over here are not mixing with the birds that have a territory over there. And to some degree there's probably going to be a requirement for a feeding station at the bottom of the garden, because that is going to be another territorial line, I've no doubt, particularly with birds like robins. So if you've got a garden and you've got hedgerow and maybe quite a wide garden, think about that. It's logic, but we don't always think about things like that. And of course, as I say, the bird feeding video will cover things in terms of what to feed. Okay, so what else can we do? Oh yes, this tree produces a lot of leaves, and this is the result of a little bit of trimming, but I've created, in the corner of the wildlife pond, I've created a wood pile which gives the amphibians in the pond that will leave the pond through this area here, it's giving them another place to really hide away, and that's something I've been meaning to do for a little while. So there's a new wood pile and it fits in very nicely there. The pond itself, the stickleback population, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I need to get a lot of the leaf matter out of the pond, not only just this year's but also previous years, because I think I have a bit of an issue with nitrates, with the amount of vegetation in the pond. Has anybody got a Oasis Pondovac or something that I can just use for a day to try and get some of this sediment out? If you have anything that you might be able to help me with, just so I can borrow it or come over and help me do it, please get in touch, because quite honestly I don't really want to spend 120 quid or more to get something that I'm going to use once, and as things are at the moment, 120 pence would be a little bit too much. So please get in touch if you can help me with that, really just to try and sort the pond out. So in this area here we've got our hibernaculum, and this is going to be very, very important now at this time of year. This is one of two, and this is basically a compost heap, but in amongst here is a load of pots and pipes and all sorts of things, and I know there's going to be a huge amount of invertebrates and animals now wintering down in here. It's good for worms, which is providing food for all sorts of things. Just lift these up, see if anybody's underneath. No. So this is an important area, and these corrugated sheets I'm leaving down here, and only yesterday, probably if we're lucky,